A Dark Piece by Dana Lee. Chapter 5. Molly and Bess rested on Lee's bed in new silk dresses. Bess's dress was quite Parisian. Lee had fashioned it after a gown she saw Mrs. Olson in once, and had admired greatly. She was now quite the sophisticate. Spring passed into summer, and Lee rested beneath the sycamores, fanning herself, talking to Jenny Broadstreet, Finbarr's fiancée. Both girls wore straw hats and light cotton dresses. Lee's feet were bare. Both were anxious for news from the boys. Jenny was a plain girl with small dark eyes, thin lips, and light brown hair. She was rather big about the hips and waist. She lived with her large family on their farm on Emmitsburg Road. Michael walked towards them from across the street. A hard look crossed his face, an open letter in his hand. "What is it, Daddy?" Jenny's face blanched, and she put her hand to her throat. Michael handed the letter to Lee. "Dear Dad, Lee, and Miss McBrien, I'm afraid I have some bad news for you this time. Let me start off and tell you it could be a lot worse. We are all still alive. I do wish I could say as much about the rest of my regiment. At the moment we are scattered. I'm writing to you the first chance I got. We have lost 16 boys, more have been wounded or captured. They were sent across the James River to a place called Belle Isle, the prisoners. I've seen it from the shore. It doesn't look so bad. Willie has been captured, as much as I know. Finn has been wounded, shot in the leg. I'm hoping for the best. He was taken to a house in Richmond that has been occupied by our boys. Richmond itself seems as if it was one big hospital, tent after tent. That's where the wounded rebels are, in tents. The flies are bad. I'm getting ahead of myself, I know, but I am trying to ease your minds as well as mine. I'm praying for the best. Finn was shot trying to breach the bluffs of the Chickahominy. I hear it was Georgian sharpshooters. I'm thankful it was a bullet. Men are losing limbs left and right to minie balls and grape shot. I'm hopeful he won't lose a leg. I was with him. It was a rifle shot, lucky again, as most of the rebels have shotguns, which do a lot more damage. I saw the wound and bounded for him before the medics took him away. I have not seen him since. He was taken in a horse-drawn cart. I'm afraid I've killed a few men myself. I can't tell you how I feel about that. I believe I will return to you a changed man. Even my fiddle seems sad. I do not know the details of Willie's capture. I'm told it happened at the place outside of town they're calling Seven Pines. As always, I will let you know whatever I hear. Much love to all of you, Glenn." Jenny fell into Lee's arms and cried like a child. Michael looked stricken, took the letter, and walked towards the house. Lee was stunned and did not know what to feel. She watched her father. He seemed so much older, broken. "I was afraid of this," Jenny blubbered. "I did not want to tell you. I didn't want to say it, as if I didn't speak it, it wouldn't happen. I had a dream last night. That's why I needed to come here today. As if I came here, I would be closer to him." Lee hugged her tight and smoothed back her hair. "What did you dream?" "I dreamt that Finn was dead. I saw him at the foot of my bed. He seemed so sad, so real. He can't die, oh, he can't. Shh, he won't. He's so strong. Of course he won't. I feel as if he was already dead. I do. I feel as if my heart has died too. Don't say that, no. Oh, Lee, you don't understand." "I know, darling. You've known Finn almost as long as I have. Nobody is closer, more dear to him." "Oh, Lee, can I tell you a secret? I wanted to anyways. I must tell someone or I will burst." "Of course, you can tell me anything." "This is bad, very bad. My father will kill me." "It can't be that bad, Jenny." Lee kissed her forehead. "You are such a good girl. Everybody knows that." "Lee, the night before Finn left, we made love for the first time. I know I shouldn't have, but we were planning to be married the first chance we could." "That's not so bad. Of course you did. You didn't know when you would see each other again. It's nice to know that he has that to hold on to." "Lee, it's worse, much worse than all of that. I'm afraid I'm carrying his child." Oh, Jenny, that's wonderful. Daddy will be so happy. This is just what he needs to hear to raise his spirits. Does Finn even know? No, nobody knows. Nobody but you. How can I tell them? I'm so ashamed. Shh, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You should be proud. Now that he is wounded, he can come home and you will be married. You can take care of him. He will be so happy, too. The baby will give him reason for recovery. I will help you. I'll take care of you. You can stay here with us. Daddy wouldn't have it any other way. You don't have to tell anybody. I wouldn't. For the time being, keep quiet. Everything is going to be fine. Everything happens for a reason. Come on now. Let's go in the house and tell Daddy. You'll be staying with us for a while. That's all anybody needs to know right now. I have to go see Mrs. Olson and tell her the news. I don't suppose she's heard from Willie yet because I haven't received a letter from him. Don't worry, your secret is safe with me. Chapter 6. Mrs. Olson sunk to the floor when Lee told her the news of Willie's supposed capture. The Olsons had not heard from him. No news must be good news. All the news seems bad these days. Jenny's going to be staying with us for a while. Oh, that's good. Yes, it will be good for everybody. Can I do anything for you? Anything at all? No, love, but thank you. I think I'd like to be alone for now. I don't feel so well. You understand. I'll be back to check on you. I don't think it's so good to be alone. Please let me know anytime if you hear any news. The news came too quickly to the McGrath house. They read it first in the newspaper, which held an insert, the death roster. Finbar was one of many names. The roster had 3 columns. Miss McBrien and the girls began sewing the Black Widow's weed dresses, and the first of a series of letters began to arrive. July 1st, 1862. Dear Mr. McGrath, it grieves me deeply to have to inform you of the death of your son Finbar. I can personally attest to his valor. He was injured in the leg by an enemy bullet while engaged along the Chickahominy River. He was then moved to a house in Richmond where he could receive the best care. Unfortunately, the wound became infected and his right leg had to be removed. He did not recover from the surgery. Your son died a hero's death. Please wait until informed with further notice concerning his remains. With my deepest sympathy for your family during this time of loss. Colonel Richard P. Lane. July 1st, 1862. To the McGrath family. I am so sorry to inform you of the death of your son. My own 3 boys are also enlisted, so I can assure you that I share your dread of loss. Our family home has been occupied as a hospital for men of both armies. There are 4 soldiers badly wounded here now. He arrived delirious and in a great deal of pain. The doctors sedated him and removed the bullet. Unfortunately, infection set in and the leg festered and swelled. I can assure you he received the best care, as I cleaned the wound and changed the bandages myself. I tried to feed him, but he did not seem to recover his senses. He would only take water. The doctor said that gangrene had set in and that he would have to remove the leg. I do not believe he suffered much through the operation. He was under sedation of chloroform. He did not regain consciousness thereafter, but lived in sleep before passing a couple of days later. His commanding officer informed me of your names and address. His remains are being shipped back to you by railway. He might be home with you before you receive this letter. He did not die in a bad place, and I can only pray that if my boys are injured, that they will receive the same care from some kindly soul. We all share in this great loss. With my deepest sympathy, Mary Norfolk, 58 Linden Row, Richmond, Virginia. Dear Dad, Lee, and Miss McBride, I was only just told the news. Finn is dead. I suppose you will be seeing him before I do. They are saying that I do not have to leave to return home for the funeral. I'll do my best to get back, however. I have some friends. The fighting is pretty bad here, and the enemy seems endless. Still, we are constantly receiving new recruits, many from right off the boat. There are some new boys here you'd like, as they speak the Gaelic. One of them was killed the same day Finn was shot. He was only 15. Seems a funny thing to me to fight for a country you've only just met. They say things are that bad in Ireland. The army is paying for their tickets over here. I do not think that many were aware of what they were in for. I don't think any of us do. Finn died of infection. His leg was amputated. I swear I felt it. I knew he was dead before they told me. I was asleep in my tent when I woke up suddenly. I never wake in the middle of the night like that, not even now with the sounds of shells surrounding me. There he was, standing there. Finn, I said, thinking at first he was back, as he looked so real. Then he just vanished. I went back to sleep thinking I was dreaming, swearing off the whiskey. Then, just before dawn, I heard a terrible shrieking, a woman. I thought it to be one of the ladies of the evening visiting with an officer, perhaps in a neighboring bivio. But one of the Irish boys jumped up, said, "Cover your ears, for it be the Banshee." He was frightened near to death. Did you hear her, Dad? I'm sorry to be scribbling on and on to you endlessly when our brother is dead. I love you, Glenn. I did hear her, Michael said. I heard her the night before he was born, and the night before he died. Of course I heard her this time. It was your mother this time. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes that had a vacant look. Lee remembered how lively his eyes used to be, dancing with light. Now they seemed like a Turner painting, she thought. There was a storm that night. It was the night you returned late from Jenny's, helping her pack. You returned late, waiting out the storm. Did you hear her? It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Lee looked to Jenny. No, we just heard the storm. But I used to think I heard her singing to me from the cemetery when I was a girl. I thought it was real. Yes, it was, she laughed. She loved to sing, my little bird. Now she won't be lonely when we put Finn there next to her. Chapter 7. The day of the funeral, Miss McBride was her worst and best. All the windows were flung open, and the mirrors draped in pall. She had spent days cooking and preparing for mourners. The body had arrived at the train station just down the street. He was in a plain wooden box packed on ice and balm, but still wouldn't keep long enough for the traditional Irish wake. The ground was calling him. He was dressed in his Yankee blue uniform. All the neighbors were there. Michael brought his finest whiskey up from the basement. The casket was opened, and Lee wished they would close it. She did not know the stark white boy who lay there. At first she thought they had made a mistake and sent the wrong body. A Union flag rested folded across his chest. Jenny seemed terribly weak and faint. Lee was so grateful to have her to worry about. Flowers, along with strange cards, flooded the first floor. Lee thought the cards were strange. Gloves, disembodied hands, and the lilies. She found the lilies looked rather grotesque, as if they were wagging their tongues, talking about her, and she got the disturbing feeling that they knew something she didn't. They were not at all like the lovely lily of the valley that she left on her mother's grave. Ernest Wood was an old school friend of the boys, and perhaps the only eligible bachelor left in town. He had 2 brothers enlisted. His father had died of consumption, and his sister Sarah was young, born sickly. His mother needed him home. Still, Lee could not help to begrudge him, especially now that she had lost a brother. She had never liked Sarah, who she considered a little brat that used her sickness to her full advantage. All the other girls in town loved Ernest and would have considered themselves fortunate for his attentions. He was tall and well-built. Lee considered him corn-fed and only laughed at his advances towards her. He was, after all, a clumsy farmer. The truth of it was that he was a hard-working man with simple needs and had inherited a very large and profitable farm from his father. Lee did not see this. "I'm so sorry for you, Lee. May I walk with you outside?" "No, I really should stay in." It will only take a moment. It's about your brother." She followed him out back and noticed Miss McBride's look of scorn as she left the room. Ernest was dressed in his church suit, and Lee admitted to herself that he cleaned up nicely. "What about my brother?" "Well, as you know, Finn and I were always the best of friends." "Everyone knows that. I know you and Willie have always been close, and I suppose Glenn would be wanting you and Willie to be, well, you know." Lee laughed. "Willie and I are like brother and sister. I don't know what you mean." He took her hand and she pulled it demurely away. His voice had fallen to a whisper now, and between the darkening sky and the song of the crickets chirping, she sort of dazed out and away. The funeral was too much for her. It all seemed surreal. "I'm glad to hear you say it, but I doubt he feels the same way. Finn said he'd hoped you'd be my wife. What do you think of that?" "What do I think of what?" His face flushed and his big hands began to sweat. "What do you think about me?" "I don't. I think you are very nice, but we ought to go in before they miss me." She turned to go, but again he grasped her hand gently. "But did you hear me? Would you even think about marrying me?" "Let go of me. Do you mean to say that you are interrupting my brother's funeral, using it as a platform to your advantage? A premise of marriage?" He hung his head for shame. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I couldn't marry you, be a farmer's wife. Why, if I wanted that, I could stay here forever with Daddy. The world is a big place. We live in a big country. Sometimes I envy my brothers who are seeing—" "You mean you would leave Gettysburg?" "Well, if I married you, I'd have to answer to that brat sister of yours. Sarah's sick, and always will be. That brat will live to see 100. Jenny is the only one stupid enough to put up with her. If you are looking for a wife, you ought to pick Jenny. She's taking this all horribly bad. You ought to be comforting her." She stormed back into the house that was growing loud and bright as the night fell around them. Jenny shared the bed with Lee, who was happy for it now. She had brought a present along with her, a beautifully elaborate set of drapes, a bed canopy, embroidered with flowering vines and birds, nightingales and larks. Her great-aunt, a lovely spinster, had made it. A lonely spinster had made it. Lee loved it, as it seemed to shut out the world. Her bed to her now seemed to be sheltered in the sanctuary of a warm, enchanted forest. "I guess we really ought to tell now, huh?" Jenny cried. "No," Lee patted her. "Just wait and see. Everything is going to be all right, Jenny. Try to go to sleep." The next morning was dark and raining. The dim light dared to sneak in upon the floor littered with sleeping mourners drunk with the life and death of this strange time. Lee washed while Jenny lay sleeping, and pulled the new black dress over her boots for the second day. She could not bring herself to wear the black veil. It scared her. She could not bear to witness her neighbors from behind the shade of fine silken black. As she descended the front stairs, she felt as if a veil of black fell all around them, and the sleepers seemed to her as if dropped on the floor and in the chairs from the pages of Sleeping Beauty, unaware of time passing. She looked in on the coffin in the parlor, still opened wide, like a macabre music box. She shuddered. Even he, the stranger in the box, seemed to be under a fairy spell. Miss McBride was already busy in the kitchen, brewing coffee, putting out little cakes, fluffy white dainties, and hot cross buns on silver serving trays, borrowed from Mrs. Olson for the occasion. Lee found it strange that the house should smell so good this morning, like flowers and cake. Finn would have liked it, she decided, and set to work helping Miss McBride in silence. She thought it stranger still when, upon the insistence of Miss McBride, the funeral procession to the cemetery went around the block a few times. Miss McBride, the woman without a first name, concealed behind the black veil, was at her ghastliest. The streets were wet and muddy. All the women hid beneath black umbrellas and lifted up their black skirts and dresses to save them from the mud. Even dear Fiona resisted, stalling the committal of her beloved old friend to the ground and grave. He wasn't given his last rites. The thought had plagued Miss McBride for some time now. She had a priest brought in for the eulogy. Michael stood with his daughter, and Lee noticed that Ernest stood beside Jenny, but was staring at her. They all looked for Glenn, half expecting to see him running up the hill before the hole was filled. Lee thought it particularly vile that the army had not granted leave and a ticket home upon a death in the family, a brother, a twin. She fell down and wept. Michael picked her up, although she would have liked to stay there on the wet ground. Mrs. Olson looked fragile but splendid in a black satin gown, held her, and cried. Chapter 8. The summer waged hot upon them. Mrs. Olson had received a letter from Willie. He was held prisoner at Belle Isle, as Glenn had thought. He described the place as a cesspool, and said more boys fell to disease there than boys had fallen from bullets at Seven Pines. Food there was scarce. He feared the water was poisoned. Jenny was beginning to show and hid herself behind a shawl. Miss McBride believed she was overindulging in butter and milk, and bit at every chance she got to tell her so. The girls were busying themselves in the garden. The tomatoes were ripe, and the string peas pulled at the stalks. "Don't bother with those, Jenny. I'll get them. You rest. Just pluck those tomatoes." "It's no secret any longer. I'm going to have to tell." "Jenny, what do you think of Ernest Wood?" "I think he's in love with you." "No, not me. I'm talking about you." "Oh, Lee, get serious. How can you think of such a thing?" "And Finn not cold in his grave. Ernest was his friend and mine, too." "That's what I'm thinking. The both of you loved him so, he would have wanted it. Besides, I'm a little angry with him for being selfish enough to have left you in this predicament." "Hush your mouth. It's true. If he would have married you before he had gone, well, there is no shame for a widow." "What are you suggesting, that I marry his friend and keep quiet? Even Ernest Wood can count to 9. Lots of babies are born before their time. Finbar and Glenn were." Jenny laughed. "My, what the little schemer you are. But I loved your brother with all my heart. I would never discredit him his child. Besides, I think your father likes having me around. I think I'll tell him tonight. Do you think he'll let me stay? I know he will. My father will not have me back again, I know." Lee was humbled by the girl's love, something she had never known. She did not understand, but only knew that it frightened her. "I'll tell Daddy for you. That will make it easier on you." Her white dress fluttered in a warm breeze as she bent over and pulled up a head of cabbage. She laughed. "Or we can just tell them we pulled the baby from the cabbage patch." Jenny laughed too, the first time in too long. Lee waited till after dinner to tell her father the secret she had held on to, like a magic charm around her neck for months now. Michael sat with the paper in his lap. He was not reading. His eyes maintained the same glazed look as before. "Daddy?" "Yes, me angel. Come sit with your dad like you used to. Daddy, do you ever wonder why Jenny has stayed on with us? I thought you liked having her around." "Oh, I do. It's not that. She's like a sister to me. I love having her, don't you?" "I love it when you're happy. This life is too short for misery. I think you girls are good for each other, especially now. I was always sorry that you didn't have a woman around. Oh, you have Miss McBride, and that's why I hired her. But she's a hard old egg. Don't get me wrong, I feel for her, for it's the world that made her so. You cannot imagine what life was like for her before she came to this country." "Yes, Daddy, but about Jenny. There's something you should know. Nobody knows, Daddy. Only Jenny and I. Even Finn had no idea." The old man looked at her, and for a moment she thought she saw a slight twinkle in his eye. "Jenny is carrying Finn's child, Daddy. She's afraid her family will disown her." Oh, can you imagine? Please don't be angry with her. It's been so very hard for her. She loved him so much. Can she stay here with us? Angry with her? The little man jumped up from his chair. Where is she? She's upstairs. Go get her. Oh, why, Daddy? Michael laughed. What's the matter, me darling? Don't you trust your old dad? He kissed her on the forehead and gave her a squeeze. Of course I do, Daddy. She found Jenny upstairs in bed with Shiner. She was sewing a little white gown. She held it up for Lee to see. It's for the baby. Oh, can I help you with that? I'm famous for little dresses. Just ask my dolls. Right now, Daddy wants to see you. Oh, Lee, did you tell him? What did he say? Come on now, get up. Here, put this robe on. Michael awaited them with a triumphant smile across his face. Jenny, come here, my girl. He put his arms around her and held her to his heart. You will always have a home here with us. Tell me, why have you kept this from me? I've lost me son. Of course I want another daughter and a grandchild. Oh, Jenny, this is the sweetest gift you could bestow upon an old man like me. Jenny started crying. Oh, thank you. I promise to be the best mother. I will make you proud of me yet. You already have. Just when I thought all was lost, just when I was falling back into despair, you have given us all a very good reason to carry on and keep living. You have. Daddy, how do you think Miss McBride will take it? As a blessing, of course, for that's what it is. If she doesn't, she's going to have to remember, as long as I live and breathe, this is my house and my family. If she wants to be a part of it, soon to be one more.